Great Lakes Prepping here. Today in the Great Lakes kitchen, we're going to be making something just absolutely over the top ridiculous. I'm talking about one of my inventions that I'm calling the Michigan pot roast sandwich. Now, why am I calling it the Michigan pot roast sandwich? Well, over the years and looking at various pot roast sandwiches, pretty much the only one that you're going to come across is something called the Mississippi pot roast sandwich. Now, this basically involves roasting or smoking a beef roast and then covering it with about 85 pounds of yellow pepperoncini rings and provolone cheese and putting that whole thing on a giant hoagie roll or something like that. Now, I've got no complaints about that whatsoever. Beef, pepperoncini rings, provolone, no problem there. But I do think it's a little bit lacking, and I've been experimenting for quite some time to come up with just the most magical combination of ingredients to create, well, the best pot roast sandwich I've ever had. And I'm very pleased to tell you that I think that I've done it, and I'm going to share it with you today. I don't have a restaurant. I'm not going to ever be on diners, drive-ins, and dives, so this is my avenue through which I can share this creation with the world that I'm really quite proud of. And of course, since I'm in Michigan and this channel has a bit of a Michigan sort of emphasis on it, well, it seemed only natural to call this the Michigan pot roast sandwich. Mississippi has one, now Michigan has one. So there's a lot of steps to go through. This is kind of an elaborate sandwich to make, but I promise you, you'll end up with a great big giant sandwich that will basically be an entire meal. And the very first thing that I have to do is actually bake the buns that this whole sandwich is going to go on. You know, I've tried a dozen different store-bought buns, and there's a lot of good ones, but the ones that are big enough aren't that good, and the ones that are great just aren't nearly big enough. So part of this whole process for me was to come up with a bun that I think was worthy of this sandwich. And I ended up making a potato brioche style bun. And I've actually made a video already about how I make those. And it was posted last week. So if you want to see that whole process, go back and watch that video. Other than that, we've got to make some condiments. We've got to fry up some shallots, and of course, cook an entire pot roast. So I'll try to blaze through all these steps as fast as I can in the video so this thing doesn't drag on too long. It's worth it, I promise, if you're into pot roast and sandwiches. So I'll quit talking, and we're going to jump right into this thing. With the potato brioche buns baked and ready to use, the next thing we have to do is get our pot roast cooking. I'll mention that you can certainly roast this in a slow cooker, but I'm going to be using the oven. It's a little quicker, and I personally think pot roast is better this way. There's only a little prep work for the roast. I'll slice up a couple white onions and get my other ingredients together. I'm using a fresh 3-pound chuck roast. I'll generously season all sides of the roast with kosher salt and black pepper. Next, I'll heat up some olive oil over medium-high heat in my enamel Dutch oven, and I want to sear the roast on all sides. I'll let each side sear for a solid couple minutes to make sure it's nicely browned on the outside. After searing, I'll remove the roast from the Dutch oven and deglaze with half a cup of dry red wine and 1 cup of beef broth. Scrape any brown bits off the bottom of the pan with a wooden spoon. A quick note, if you don't have an enamel Dutch oven and intend to use either a separate oven roasting pan or a slow cooker, you can do the searing and deglazing steps in a large skillet and then transfer that liquid to your roasting pan or slow cooker before moving on to the next steps. Now I'm going to lay down my onion slices in the Dutch oven right in that liquid, making sure to cover the entire bottom. These onions are going to serve as a delicious base layer rather than using something like a meat trivet. With the onions down, I'll set my roast back in. Now I want to add some more water until the level of liquid is just coming up the roast part way. I don't want to submerge the roast, but the liquid should be touching it. Now for some more seasonings. I've got 2 tablespoons of powdered beef soup base or beef bouillon, 1/2 teaspoon of dry thyme, 1/2 teaspoon onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon black pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon celery seed. I'll mix these seasonings together and then distribute over top of the roast. And for one final touch before baking, I like to baste a little bit of the liquid over top just to help all that seasoning start to incorporate into the roast. Now with the lid on, the whole thing is going into the oven, preheated to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. We're doing this roast kind of low and slow, and I'll end up leaving it in there for 4.5 hours. And while the meat is roasting, we have plenty of time to make our condiments and get everything else ready. This sandwich uses 2 condiments, garlic chive mayonnaise and roasted red pepper spread. Both are very simple to make, and both are absolutely delicious. For the garlic chive mayo, it couldn't be simpler. We just need to mince up some fresh chives and fresh garlic and mix it into some mayonnaise. We'll combine 1 cup of real mayonnaise, none of that Miracle Whip nonsense, with 2 tablespoons of minced chives and 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. A thorough blend with the immersion blender, and that's it. I'll cap the jar and stick it in the fridge until it's time to use. And I really recommend not skipping this condiment. This garlic chive mayo in particular is what dreams are made of. And next we'll make the roasted red pepper spread. I'll mention that you can absolutely roast your own red bell peppers for this recipe, but this time around I just ended up using a jar of already roasted peppers. After draining the water that these peppers were packaged in, I measure out 1 tightly packed cup of the pepper strips and put them in a jar. Then to that jar I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon sugar, 1/2 teaspoon onion powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/8 teaspoon black pepper, 1/8 teaspoon ground cayenne pepper, 1/8 teaspoon dry thyme, and 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. Then once again, we'll give it a thorough blending with the immersion blender. There's one last step we have to do for the roasted red pepper spread. Since the mixture is pretty thin at this point, we need to thicken it up. And the way to do that is to reduce it. So I'm going to pour my puree into a small saucepan and simmer it over pretty low heat until it's thickened up. Stirring occasionally, I'm going to cook this until it reduces by around 1/2. I want it to be a good, spreadable consistency. It'll thicken up a little more when refrigerated, so I don't need to reduce it into an absolute paste. I let this simmer for probably around 25 minutes before putting it into a jar and refrigerating it until it's time to use. And again, I really suggest not skipping this red pepper spread if you make this sandwich. Between the shallots, garlic, and chives, there are a lot of strong flavors going on, and my earlier versions of this sandwich didn't include the second condiment, but I felt that it needed that touch of sweetness and acid to balance out those oniony flavors. This combination is absolutely mouthwatering, and I can't recommend it enough. Now to jump ahead in time a little bit to when our pot roast is ready to come out of the oven. The key to a great pot roast is cooking it long enough, and you can see how tender and juicy this meat is when I barely graze across it with a fork. After removing the meat from the Dutch oven, I need to completely shred it. This is super easy because the fork just pulls it apart into little shreds with almost no effort. Then I'll set the meat aside for a few minutes, as well as all that liquid that's still in the pot. There's just a couple things left to do before we start building our sandwich. I mentioned shallots earlier, and now is when they come into play. We're going to make some crispy fried shallots, and it's very easy to do. First, we just need to slice up a couple shallots. I'm going to slice them as thinly as possible, long ways. We're not going to batter them or deep fry them. For crispy shallots, we just need to gently saute them in some olive oil. Heat up some olive oil in a skillet over medium heat. Just enough oil to fully coat the bottom of your skillet. When the oil is well heated, throw in the shallots and spread them out in the oil. Let them cook for somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. Be sure to keep a close eye on them because they will begin to turn brown pretty suddenly, and it doesn't take long for them to go from brown and crispy to burnt. Remove the shallots when they're a good golden brown color and set on paper towel to absorb some of that excess oil until you're ready to use them. Now it's time to really start putting this sandwich together. Cut your buns in half and brush the inside of each half with melted butter. Then set them face down in a hot skillet to toast. At this point, I'm using my SteelMade flat top, but you can definitely do this in a clean skillet. Let the buns toast for a couple minutes until the inside starts to turn golden brown. Now it's time to bring our condiments back into the mix. Spread a good coating of that garlic chive mayo on the inside of the bottom bun and spread the roasted red pepper spread on the top bun. I recommend putting the mayo on the bottom bun because mayonnaise is fatty and this creates a bit of a waterproof fat barrier so our juicy, moist beef doesn't start to soak through that bottom bun. We've all had soggy hamburger buns, and I think we can all agree that they're no good. Now for the last step. In a clean, hot skillet, or in my case, the SteelMade flat top, set down a sandwich-sized pile of that shredded beef. Then quickly pour over a bit of that jus from the pot and cover with 2 slices of Havarti cheese. I think Havarti is perfect for this sandwich, but you can certainly use something like Swiss if you prefer. Adding that little bit of jus will help keep the meat moist and will also create some steam which will help melt that cheese more quickly. And ordinarily, I cover the pile of meat and cheese with a pan lid or similar cover because it makes the cheese melt even better. But it completely slipped my mind during the chaos of filming this video today. Carefully scoop everything up with a large flipper and transfer it to that bottom bun. Place a nice handful of the crispy shallots on top. This right here is about 1 entire shallot. Finally, put the top bun in place. Now all that's left to do is to sink your teeth into the Michigan pot roast sandwich and enjoy. And check out the video description for a link to the full recipe, which includes every component of this sandwich. It's hard not to sound like I'm tooting my own horn when I say that that is just one of the most delicious things I've ever tasted. I played around with this recipe for quite some time trying to find just the right condiments and sandwich accessories to go with this, as well as what kind of bun to use. And it's my opinion that this is the absolute magic combination. Now, if you think that that's maybe a little too much bread, a little too much bun for your liking compared to the other ingredients, well, pile that meat as high as you want, or use a different kind of bun. A nice onion roll would go great with this. I love the potato bun, though. It's kind of like I'm having a pot roast dinner all in one sandwich with the meat, the onions, or I guess the shallots, and the potato bun. I guess the only thing I'm missing is working some carrots in there somehow. But if you want to make something really special, try this sandwich out. You know, if you're making a pot roast anyway, you only need a handful of more ingredients to give it a go. And again, I've got nothing against the Mississippi pot roast sandwich. Meat, yellow peppers, what's not to like? But if you want to kick it up a couple of notches, give the Michigan pot roast sandwich a try. So that's it for now. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including, of course, food videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you here next time, right here in the Great Lakes Kitchen.